Bandwidth for this podcast is brought to you by Ideate Software. Be sure to check out all of their great Revit applications designed to increase your productivity.
Okay, now that we're all here, it's BIM Thoughts time. We're trying to record a BIM Thoughts, and we might be able to do it if you can hear the sound of my voice. We were able to record a podcast successfully today, and we're here with Vickie Harris, Carl Storms, and Dana DeFilippi. Vickie, how are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
I am just walking on sunshine. So Vickie, define yourself.
Well, I'm Vickie Patel Harris. I am the Firmwide BIM leader at HKS. I've been in the world of architecture for 14 years now, undergraduate and graduate background in architecture, but then I transitioned over to, I guess, what we call the dark side, and now focus on BIM.
You know, the dark side is either the technology side or you quit the architecture firm and go into the VAR/consulting side.
Well, I haven't gone as far as to the consulting side yet.
Yes. And then when you leave the consulting side, you don't go to the light side, you go to industry, which makes a lot of no sense. A lot of no sense. So 14 years in a row at the same place.
Yep. I've been at HKS since I graduated with my undergraduate degree.
Oh, congratulations. That's wonderful. You must like it there.
I do. HKS has been a great place to start your career and then grow up. A lot of learning and mentoring opportunities. Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, LPA is the same way, I have determined. Wish I would have found LPA a lot sooner in my career. But that's okay. We're all at great places now.
Yep.
So you're the BIM manager. I almost said mangler, but I didn't.
No, I'm sure she's not a BIM mangler. We wouldn't have her on BIM Thoughts if she were a BIM mangler.
No,
right? I'm sure HKS wouldn't hire her as their firm-wide leader if she were a mangler.
I would hope
Speaking
not.
of location, also, it looks like you're out of Dallas.
I am out of Dallas.
That's pretty cool. Would you guys say that that's your home base, the Dallas office?
Yeah, Dallas is what we call our headquarters. It's what we sometimes also call the mothership. But yeah, Dallas is our main office. It's where the firm actually started.
And how many offices do you guys have?
That's
huge.
Yeah, we have, I believe, 24 offices, domestic and international.
Wow.
So yeah, I think 20 of those are here within the States, and then the 4 are international.
So what is it like to be a firm-wide BIM leader of 24 offices of HKS?
I'm not 100% sure yet. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Because it's just to wrap my head around it, it seems daunting. But I'm sure you do an amazing job, which is why they put you in that role. 14 years there, right? You must know a lot of ins and outs about the BIM going on, BIM happenings at HKS.
Yeah, I'm still trying to put my head around it as well. I don't know all of it yet. I definitely don't know a lot of the BIM aspects for the international side of things, but I'm learning that. But when it comes to domestic, I've had a good understanding of that, and the huge benefit to that has been that of my years at HKS, 10 plus, probably a little bit of like 11 years, we're actually working on the job. So I was actually in the practice working on projects, and my role just continued to be from project to project, that BIM manager role, if you will. And I would get moved from one project to another project just to go be the BIM manager, even though project A was not complete. I would get moved from project A to project B because they needed BIM help. And at some point I just said, well, I feel like I'm doing this across the firm, so why not just have me do it full time instead of pulling me from a project to put me onto another project. So that's kind of how I got to where I got to. And then I just gravitated more towards focusing on standards. And that's when I got the, firm-wide BIM role of being the leader to oversee that. So it is still a challenge even across just the domestic offices, because even though we are one firm and we like to do things a certain way, every office has its unique nature. And so trying to find a happy medium for all of those uniqueness is a challenge. But that's what I like. It's, hey, okay, this is a standard, but how can we make it to where your office can still operate the way it's operating, deliver the same type of projects that they are delivering to the clients, and not break any of our firm-wide standards. So it's daunting. It's something I don't have my head completely wrapped around, but that's kind of what I like about it. It's not the same thing every single day. It's a new challenge, a new adventure, and it makes it exciting.
Kind of sounds like you've already been in a consulting gig, just all within one firm.
Yeah, I guess you could look at it that way. It's definitely not something I've looked at it that way, but yeah, if you think about it, definitely, because it's not just the different offices, but then we have different practices. So our hospitality group may need to do something very differently than our healthcare group, and still being able to find a place that will meet both of those needs, so that we're not managing, 25 Revit templates or 25 different versions of a family, and trying to find a way that it could work for both groups is definitely fun and challenging, but never thought of it as being a consultant where you're just trying to make sure the stuff that you've already made works for every potential client you might have.
Yeah, no doubt. I guess that also sort of brings into the idea of not wanting to work with 25 different templates. Do you get to spend any time, or do you feel that the need to spend time with some of the other consultants that you're working with, meaning like the engineering firm, the architecture firm, maybe the contractor if they're involved early, to kind of help their people see the light, if you will, to work the way that you guys like to work? Or are you guys able to be flexible and work with whatever comes your way as far as standards and interoperability?
So we do set up some standards for our consultants that we work with. We have some guidelines in the BIM execution plan, and those are mainly focused around naming and kind of model health and cleanliness, if you will. But outside of that, we do not dictate a lot of how they model and what kind of content they put into their model, as long as it's not causing issues and corruptions on our side. I have had some of them reach out and say, well, we've worked with HKS on a number of projects, and it's apparent to us that if we kind of change some of our standards, it would make it better for us to work with you guys long term. And of course, when they reach out, we're happy to help and provide that kind of feedback, because yes, it would help both parties in that scenario. But we understand that each company has their own standards and they have their own reasonings. And with HKS being primarily architecture, we do have a small structural group internally. But as architects, I don't think it's fair for us to say, well, MEP engineer, this is how you should be doing your MEP model, when we've never had our own experience doing that. So yeah, we have some guidelines, but we don't fully dictate what their model should have and how it should be modeled or what elements it should contain.
Well, and I think that makes sense. That's just in general a good principle, because you're not making people sort of relearn it, but the fact that you do have some people that have worked on your projects that recognize the time and effort that's gone into putting together your standards and putting together your practices, and say, we understand that if we adopt some of these, it might make life better for everyone. I think that just speaks to the quality of the product that you guys are putting together.
Yep, I agree. And it's, again, repeat consultants, repeat work type. So, for many of our healthcare projects, we're working with the same MEP engineer the same structural engineer, and they're working with the same client. So when they realize that, hey, this is going to be a majority of our work for the next couple of years, it's definitely an investment that they're willing to make too, because they're not having to redo it every time they start a new project.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
and I actually, speaking from the architectural side, have worked with HKS on a joint venture, actually, in Washington, D.C., big hospital project. Shout out to Giselle Santos, HKS DC. She's actually a very good friend of mine. We worked at HOK together many moons ago. So we worked together on that project, and it was very much that way. I mean, we, came together to establish a BIM execution plan and, how to best, work together in that environment. And it was very much it was a joint venture, but it was also very much a collaborative endeavor in terms of setting up all of those standards. And, there wasn't, of course it helps that we're friends, but just the teams in general were very susceptible to, accepting of being, just part of the team, whether it's with, the joint venture side or with internally. So I know that regardless of whether you're an engineer or an architect, you guys play really nicely in the sandbox together. And of course, us in the BIM side of things definitely appreciate that.
Well, we try.
So what does it look like managing, getting resources out and developing those types of standards? How do you even share that type of information with an office so big? And trying to get out all of that information, make sure that people are, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, so with a firm that big, and I'm going to stop, I know Giselle as well. She's a great person, has a lot of great things going on for her right now. So that's cool that we have that person in common. And when the world allows us to travel, maybe we can meet up in DC one time and have some drinks.
Oh, I would love that. Yes, any opportunity that I have to hang out with Giselle, I'm definitely going to take.
Right, well, I'll let her know. I'll send her a message later that I chatted with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I saw she recently became, I believe, a vice president, right? Of
Yeah,
HK.
yeah, and she's our director of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So yeah, it's a very fitting role for her. But on the topic of, how do you produce these standards and, the more challenging, how do you share and make sure for the office is using them? That is a huge challenge. And up till recently, what we had was kind of a champions network. We had individuals. Well, I'm going to step back. The kind of structure within our group. So our group is called Practice Technology at HKS. And the structure that kind of exists is that I'm the firm-wide BIM leader, but then we have regional PT leaders over our specific regions within the firm. So we have America West and America Central, America East, and then we have the UK international area, and then the EMEA, which is the Middle East and Asia. So each one of those regions has a dedicated practice technology regional leader. And then up till recently, we had what was a champions network. So within those regions, the offices that were in those, we would identify somebody as a champion, and they would kind of be our liaison that we would communicate to and say, hey, these are new things that are coming out from practice technology, or here's a new standard, or here's an update to the content. And then it would be that champion's kind of responsibility to then make sure it's communicated out to the office. Although that kind of in theory works, when you have a person who is just a champion, you know that they're already doing that on top of their day-to-day work. And sometimes their champion related work will maybe fall through the cracks because, well, they've got deadlines, they've got other things to focus on. So here recently, we started to implement what we call practice technology specialist. And it's based off of the same concept, but a little bit more. So many of those champions are now our specialists, but instead of them doing it as a champion style responsibility, they are now given dedicated time that is going towards billable work. So as a champion, they had a billable project number they could bill to, but again, their project managers we're expecting them to be working 100% on their project. Now these practice technology specialists have a split utilization. So they have an X amount of time that is going to be billed to their daily project. So whatever architectural work that they're focused on for that project, they will have X amount of time towards that. Then the other X amount of time is distributed across a number of projects. So they are now overseeing the BIM implementation for, let's say, 3 other projects. And they are taking that other portion of their time and they are billing it across those 3 projects, and they're checking in with those projects to make sure that they are utilizing the right standards. They're making sure that that BIM execution plan is in place. They're going through and checking the models with the BIM manager to kind of make sure that, hey, everything is checking out, matching what we've kind of laid out. Or you've got some problems here, these things need to be taken care of. That, as I said, is in process now and is getting implemented. But just knowing that, like I said, many of the champions transitioned to this position, they have felt such a burden taken off of their shoulders, if you will, because they are passionate about this. They always wanted to be a part of this process, but that pressure of, well, I can't go and do this. I can't go and help this team or let them know that, hey, you've got a bunch of warnings here. You need to correct this when I am expected to work on my project 100%. Now that they have that split utilization and their project managers are aware that a portion of their time is going to be dedicated elsewhere, and the leadership of that office and the leadership of the firm completely supports that, those individuals now feel like they actually can do what we've been asking them to do for years. So in a long-winded way, that's how we are making sure that the standards we put in place and what we put out there is actually what's being utilized on projects. Ask me in a couple of years how that's working. I'm hoping I can say it's amazing. I know a lot of other firms have a similar model, and it's been working there. So I'm hoping that this grows into a much robust system than what we had in the past.
That sounds great. I think that is going in the right direction, I think. Because it's always interesting finding when you talk to someone who's doing the work that they're like, well, I would love to do that, but what's going to happen is that I'm going to have to spend 8 hours a day doing production work, and then in my free time I'll get to play and do all this other good stuff. And so I think the approach that you just shared with us is a great approach. I think it's great for all the projects and all of the and for the product that you guys produce. He also said talk to you in 2 years, so we'll make sure we put a note in that to get you back in 2 years. But tell us something that happened 2 years ago that was a great success. So if we did talk to you 2 years ago, what would we be talking to you about now?
Oh man, I mean, last year has been such a blur that I don't even know if I can recall what happened past last year.
Yeah, last year is still a blur for that matter. Yeah, we're all trying to be remote and doing that kind of thing. That sure has changed the office around
Definitely.
too. And it's going to change the office for years to come. I think we'll
Absolutely.
find a lot of people still working remotely all over the place. I think, and that working remotely brings up a lot of different challenges, just not on the technology side, but in the business side as well. Because if you think about it, if someone wants to move to Tennessee and you don't have an office in Tennessee, how are you going to pay them? What do you have to set up and that? So we got to think about all of these different things when we want to ask to work remotely from a different spot. That came up in an email today, and so it came to mind that, wow, I didn't really think about that when thinking about moving to a Zoom city, I think is what they're called. A Zoom town. Is that what they're called? Is that what the cool
Zoom
kids are
offices.
calling? Or Zoom, yeah, where you move into a city that's got great internet, but nothing else. But
Yeah.
but recreation and things like that to do. So looking back at some of your accomplishments, what's up there with your proud moments?
Well, I will say one of my proud moments was, I was able to be a keynote speaker at Midwest U.
Wow.
And I don't know if I will say that it was a proud moment, but I think from that experience, and coming out of that, finding the fact that, what I'm trying to say is it kind of helped my confidence moving
Yes.
into this world. When I did make the transition, it's really still kind of like, well, there's a lot of other experts out there, and I'm just an amateur here. I know how to do this well on a project, but do I really know what the others know? And doing the keynote and coming off of that and having other people approach me and come talk to me and want to pick my brain about some more stuff, it just helped me realize that, well, yeah, I do know more than what I thought I did.
Yeah.
So I will say that's a proud moment when I made the switch, and I'm sure others who have made the switch have had this happen, but there are a lot of, naysayers. There are a lot of people that were like, oh, this is career suicide. You don't want to do this. How can you leave architecture? And a few years after that, my project manager that I worked with, who, he wasn't not supportive. He was just like, well, if this is what you want to do, sure. But he came back and he was just like, I was on the fence of you doing this. I didn't say it, but I was on the fence. And now looking back, this was the best move you made, not just for yourself, but for the company as well. So that was a proud moment to have reassurance that making a switch, taking a leap that I wasn't 100% sure of was the right decision for me.
Yeah, that's pretty scary, isn't it?
Yeah,
when you make that switch.
And unfortunately, there's, in this industry, there's still a lot of, kind of question around what we do in this part of the industry and what our roles really mean, and a lot of kind of non-support. Like I've still heard from people as we've been implementing these practice technology specialists, where some of, their managers are like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, don't you want to do more architecture? And they're like, well, I'm still doing it, and this is part of the process. This isn't going to be me going and being a tech guru. This is me making sure that we're delivering projects like we said we would. So yeah, to say that, 6 years after I've made the switch, or 5 years, whatever it is, there's still people out there that don't get what we do and how important it is to the overall project.
Oh, absolutely. And how important it is to the company.
Yeah.
One of the people in our team put together a like a little dashboard for every Revit project. So it's the initial view when they start up, and it's got a little gas gauge on it and other things, and it uses Clarity to get the model matrix, and it puts that right there on the dashboard for them. And we are starting to see some return on investment on that, because we're getting project managers and we're getting the people working on the model looking at that gas gauge, and it's going over to the red, and they're noticing the model's getting a little slower. And so they're starting to reach out to us now to help get that model cleaned up, which is wonderful news, because now it's affecting the whole team. When you get a model that's clean, as you know, and it loads fast for you, it's going to load fast for everybody else in the team and for all your consultants and all that other stuff. So right down the chain, where now we're spending more time billing and less time twiddling our thumbs, figuring out when this darn computer is going to load. So it's those little successes and those little victories like that that make a big difference to the whole firm. And you can't do those things unless you have a team dedicated to do that.
Absolutely. And those dashboards, having those out in front of the projects, I think has made a world of difference
Oh,
in so
yeah.
many firms.
Mm-hmm.
I know in the past when you would tell people, oh, well, you've got like 1,000 warnings and you should take
Mm-hmm.
care of those. They just rolled their eyes at you and said that it doesn't matter. And now
Right.
when you've got dashboards that show them how over time, you see how this number has increased and your model has gotten slower,
Mm-hmm.
they start to recognize that, oh, okay, that is the reason.
Right. And also, now that we have that dashboard on every project, we have a big dashboard just for us to show us all of the project files, all the central files, and how they're all performing, so that we can look and say, oh, this one's getting up there in the red or in the orange. We better be proactive and see about getting that one fixed as well. So having all that data is wonderful. Wonderful,
Absolutely.
wonderful.
Data is absolutely wonderful, and the conversation about working with clarity and the way that we've sort of decided to split up the time so that we're not just billable to the project that Vickie's been talking about here. I'm wondering if part of this role in overseeing the entire technology team. So I'm wondering if R&D rolls into your department, Vickie. So is that something that you do? Is there people on the team that experiment with VR and AR and all those things, dashboards like Bill was talking about? Or how does that stuff come into play? Is it just checking out the exhibitors at conferences when we can do that again, or is there a dedicated department for that?
So we don't have a dedicated department within PTE in terms of R&D around technology. We do have a dedicated research group at HKS that does a lot of R&D across the practice and the industry. But within PT, we do have specialized roles even within our titles. So we do have, similar to me, we do have a firm-wide visualization leader who does look into all of the new technologies that are available for visualization, VR, AR, MR, and all of those things. And then within the regional leaders that I told you about, they also have their passion. So one of those individuals is a PhD, has a PhD, sorry, and so he's got a research background, and so he likes to look at things from a research perspective and does do some research type of stuff on his own. And then myself, I am always checking out what's out there and saying, this is interesting. Is this something that, we were trying to solve this problem anyways? Is this something that will help us? So we do definitely do that kind of R&D. Over the last couple of years, though, we have become a little bit more prioritized and focused on certain initiatives. So when I first started, it was kind of a, hey, this looks cool, and I think it might be helpful at HKS. Can we, see if we can get some trial licenses and test this out and see how it works? And not to say that that's not possible, but we do have our priorities and initiatives that, does that tool fit into our process that we're focusing on at the moment? If it does, then it definitely gets put in and we start to do the R&D behind it. But if it doesn't, then we kind of leave it in the back burner type of thing. We do get an understanding of what it does, but will we actually do any active testing with it? Maybe not. For example, I will pick on, Carl, what you know well right now, BIMTrack. We have looked at BIMTrack, we have looked at Revisto, and although they do fall into our workflow, when we have project teams who we can't even get them to start using Navisworks and to start doing clash detection, well, how can we add another layer to that when they're not even on that layer? So right now, our focus in that topic is we need to have all of our projects doing clash detection, utilizing Navisworks for those design level coordination meetings. And then we can introduce how you can make this more collaborative through BIMTrack or through Revisto or any other tool. So we get to do it that way, and I have seen that that's a much better approach. Like I said, when I first started, it was yeah, this is cool, let's test it. but then we would get it, we would purchase it, and the utilization of it was not there. So then we would, not renew it the next year. So then what benefit was that versus, if we do it this way and we now say, okay, all projects are doing this. Okay, so now you can use BIMTrack or Revisto or BIM 360, whatever it is, and now you can collaborate with your engineers on these clashes and keep track of it. So that's a very detailed example, but that's how we kind of approach technology R&D, unless there's a specific client requirement that says, hey, we would like to utilize this tool, and then of course we cater to what that client needs.
Well, of course, the client is king, and I think that's in many industries. But I think the idea of having an understanding of what you can and can't take on from a research and development perspective, and well, the first way of, hey, this is a shiny new thing, let's try it, is certainly the fun way. You're absolutely right. If you do that a couple times and things sit on the shelf and don't get adopted, that's when you don't get to look at the shiny new things anymore. So understanding that we're focused on getting people to collaborate and use Navisworks first, and focusing on that, getting them in place, and then a year or two down the road, you come and talk to us about an issue tracking platform like BIMTrack. We'd be happy to have you, or any other platform. I think that just means that when you get to that stage, you're going to be much more focused on looking at that, and you're going to find the best product at the time. So to me, it just seems like a good way to do it, but it does mean that there had to be that little bit of forward thinking and that time to put into R&D, even if it's just that little time up front to say, these are the things we want to focus on. That still took time, and doing that saves the time on the back end and the shelfware that we like to talk about, where things were bought and put on a shelf and not used. So I think, as much as you said that was a long-winded answer as my long-winded reply, I think it's a great strategy, and it's going to get you much more effective down the road, and your ROI is going to be higher on the things that you do choose to implement and use.
Yep, definitely. And one thing that we did not do when I first joined is proof of concept. So even now, when we do bring in another tool and we've tested it within PT, before we move forward and say, okay, yes, this is going to be a new standard, we do a proof of concept with a couple of projects. And once it's past that, will we say, okay, this is now ready for the whole firm? And it's hard because that takes a long time, if you will. And technology is changing so quickly, and we're all just like, well, I want this in place now. So having that patience and saying, no, this is the best way to get that full implementation of it, takes a little learning, because, as you said, the shiny object is what we want, and we want it now versus 6 months to a year down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, that idea of the restraint and the focus is certainly going to pay off, and I think we're seeing that in general when you look at companies and startups and people that are offering services in our industry in general are understanding that proof of concepts and testing something and validating are becoming much more of people's everyday work of life, and they're more willing to do that because they understand that if you get to kick the tires and actually try something, as opposed to just seeing the fancy 10-minute demo, you're much more likely to understand how it works, and then that's going to lead you to help them bring a better adoption about. So again, I think it's the way of the future.
Yep.
I think this is the part where we say, Dana, you've got to have a final thought.
Right.
Well, what do you say to people that want to spread the word, or kind of spread BIM within their firm? How do they get into that role if they don't have the HKS to back them and give them this amazing position as a BIM coordinator? How do we make sure that we can branch and give our time enough so that we're not spending all of our free time creating Dynamo scripts or standards or adding that to the Revit template or what have you? Like, how can we actually make change as a production architect or engineer?
Well, I'm going to say that is a challenge because it is going to take some personal free time. But if you're passionate about it, you'll be able to make the change that you want. But I think, an individual that's in that shoe, they really have to look at it from a business perspective and make a business case, which is hard because, again, if you don't have any experience doing that, then you don't even know where to begin. So having a good mentor also helps. That's what I had. So having a few things in your briefcase, i.e. a mentor, and then a mentor who can help you build a business case, to say, look, this is, if it is a Dynamo script and that's what you want to continue to do, create more Dynamo scripts for your firm, then you need to be able to come in and justify what that Dynamo script did and how much time it saved, which at the end of the day equals money to whoever you're presenting it to. You can't always focus on the cool stuff that it does, right? Because that's where we kind of gravitate and say, oh, look at how cool this is. It automated all of that. But you've got to turn that into, okay, what did it really do? How much time did it really save for me? And then that translates to that project manager or to your practice leader or office leader that, oh, wow, this one script saved, 5 hours a week for this one project. And then they can quickly start doing the math and say, well, if we had this for all projects, and then if we did another one like this, oh, they start to see those dollar signs, and then they would definitely say, okay, yeah, we're totally fine with you spending 50% of your time on that, and 50% on a project, and then even more or even less. But being able to present it that way, I think, is really important. And that's going to take time. That's where I'm going to say it's going to take that personal investment, because you're not going to be able to build that business case while you're trying to do that on a project. Building the Dynamo script while you're working on a project, well, you're doing that because it's going to benefit you anyways. But then stepping back and putting it into a presentable format, creating the metrics from it, kind of documenting that, and then coming back and presenting it is something that you do definitely have to do on your free time. When I made the transition, it was the first time I ever sat down with our new CEO at HKS at that time. So I was very, very comfortable with Ralph Hopkins, who was the CEO when I started at HKS, and then it transitioned over to Dan Noble. And although I knew Dan Noble, I'd never sat down with him one-on-one. But when I made the switch, I went and talked to him straight. And I said, look, this is what I do on a project, and this is how it's been happening. And every time I get pulled and put onto another project to do the same thing, this is how much time is being lost. So I wasn't more of this is how much time it's saving. It was every time you pull me from one project to another, this is a loss that is happening. And that's because you're transitioning me, so I have to offload my work, I have to do all of that, plus now I have to start up a new project over here. So what if I just pulled away from projects completely, and now I provided this guidance and support to all projects at HKS? And he's like immediately like, okay, tell me more. And so we had that conversation, and that's what sold him. And he's like, okay, let's talk to whoever else we need to talk to start this transition for you. That part of it wasn't, getting that stuff wasn't hard for me. I come from a business background. My parents have owned hotels. So I knew that I had to do that kind of prep work. But for me, challenging part was to sit down with our CEO that I've never sat down with one-on-one and make this case. What I did go in with in the mindset, and I always tell people, is what's the worst thing that can happen? Mentally prepare yourself for that. So if the worst thing that can happen in that scenario is that he says, no, I just want you to keep doing what you're doing. If you're mentally prepared to accept that, then having that conversation, making that presentation isn't going to be hard. But key factors, a good mentor who's going to support you and walk you through that stuff. I still have great mentors right now in my career, and will always look towards them and look for more. And then just, having a way to propose what it is that you want to do in a way that's going to not provide, but show the value and you moving into that role or that position.
I think that's a great point. And I think especially the mentor part with the virtual space that we're in, it doesn't have to be somebody you work with directly, right? Like it could be just somebody within the industry that you look up to that does something, similar to what maybe your aspirations are.
Definitely. I've got mentors across the board. I've got mentors who don't even do architecture, because you always need that perspective too. You need somebody who has absolutely no idea what you do, but can just look at the scenario and say, well, I think this is where you might need a little bit more help or need to focus on. When I made the transition before I talked to the CEO, I went back and talked to the original project manager I started with at HKS, who knew me really, really well. And she was one of the most supportive people, even though she's like, well, I think you can still do really well in architecture. But she's like, I see it. You're really good at this. So even though it was somebody I was not working with anymore, she was a person I went back to bounce the idea off of. So I think regardless of what position you're in and what industry you're in, mentorship is super important. And Dana, you're absolutely right. This past year has opened up the opportunity of mentorship in so many different ways. Because I know within the office, a lot of times that was, okay, well, who can I walk up to and go talk to? Who am I not intimidated to go walk up and talk to? And now with some of that being virtual, it's easier to just send somebody a message and say, hey, I'd like to bounce an idea off of you. You have 5 minutes. Versus in the office, you might have been scared to walk up to them. So some positive things out of 2020 in some ways.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I don't know. I think a benefit is being able to work in your pajamas or no clothes if you want. I mean, just don't share your camera, right? Make sure it's covered, in fact, just so you don't have any accidents.
Yeah. Or the extra 30, 40, whatever your commute was, minutes.
Oh my gosh. And the blood pressure, like lowering just because of that, right? You don't have to worry about that much extra time that you're going to lose of your life.
Yeah, definitely.
Sitting in rush hour or whatever. Possibly getting hit by a car if you're riding a bike, which was my scenario in DC.
So I guess I can ask a question, right?
100% you can.
How have each of y'all's firms and companies approached moving into 2021 in terms of, things opening back up? Do you guys see a future where you're also still remote working to a certain extent, and has that been discussed?
Well, I'll go first. When I made the switch to BIMTrack, it was into a role where I would 100% of the time be a remote worker from home. So I kind of this is just what I do. But what will come back into play once things open up and we can start traveling again is being able to meet the rest of the team, go to the office, sort of get that networking and do things, and of course
camaraderie
for conferences. Yeah, that's what will come back. So I sort of transitioned to a remote role just as the rest of the world did. The difference being is that this is where I'm going to stay. So but I'm looking forward to being able to travel again for sure.
What about you, Bill?
Our office just sent out a survey monkey asking a bunch of questions about remote work. So I know our company is looking at it seriously if they spent the time to send out a very long survey asking us.
What were some of your responses?
What were some of my? Well, I work remotely, and I'm one of the few people who have been working remotely for quite some time. There's pros and cons to working remotely.
But you also traveled a lot with you went to Irvine every other week,
I traveled
right?
once a week, and I do miss that. So I would go on Wednesdays and spend the day in Irvine. And that would be the day I would meet with all my friends and get all the tasks I needed to get done for the next Wednesday. So that's how I worked it. But I can see having 1 or 2 days a week away from the office for a regular non-IT kind of a person. Because, and the reason I'm saying that is I see value in that collaboration in the office, especially when working on a project. I don't know how many,
And you
if
don't
it's
think that
happened or
can
how.
be done through Zoom or WebEx or
I think you
virtually?
miss that if your eyes, if your ears are perked and you're nosy and you pay attention, the thing that they forgot to tell you, you sort of get an inkling about it and you ask. Where if you're remote 100% of the time, the things they forgot to tell you aren't a problem until it's a big problem. Where if you're
Amen to that.
we're in the office, it's like, wait a minute here, I thought we were supposed to do this. And you can get that solved a little bit quicker. I do see value in going back into the office. I do see value in working from home.
You know, you're speaking specifically to a production architect or engineer, right? What about someone that is on the BIM side, the dark side?
Yeah, I have the same problem with my IT counterparts as well. Because they're in the office, I am not. And so they're going to pick up on things that I would not pick up on. And so there are some things that I probably miss out on and not doing or picking up. And then the ad hoc meetings I miss out on a lot as well because I'm not there for the ad hoc meeting. And they do their ad hoc meeting, and then I say, hey, why didn't you call me? Say, oh, we forgot to call you. Sorry. So I hear that a lot. But I don't know if that's going to change now that we have all been remote for so long. Maybe that will fix itself. Maybe people will remember.
You're going to have to call.
You're going to have to call.
It's not a matter of forgetting.
Yeah.
Like, that's not an excuse anymore.
Right.
And so luckily at Smith Group being such a huge firm, and I'm interested to see what Vickie says about HKS being, you know, as big as they are and as inclusive as they are. You know, we basically have a no judgment policy that if you can't come to work, then stay at home, work from home.
Mm-hmm.
Our DC office is actually the only office of ours that has not opened because we're right next to the White House. There's all kinds of COVID restrictions that keep us from opening and all that.
Yeah, so our California offices haven't opened yet,
wow.
But our Texas office has.
Well,
I think every other office has besides DC.
Mm-hmm.
What were you saying? Dallas has opened or has not, Vickie?
I was saying Texas is a whole nother animal.
Texas is a whole nother animal, isn't it?
Yeah. So at HKS, our offices are open, but there is no requirement for employees to have to work from the office. And that's been in place for many months now. If you would like to go work from the office, if you have reasons where, you know, some families where, you know, there's just too much activity happening at home, a parent needs to go and work from the office. So they have that option. They have a system in place.
There's also people, especially in the urban areas, they live in studios, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't even have space to just set up a second monitor, let alone like, you know, lay out drawings or whatever we're doing today, you know?
Yeah.
Materials, the whole thing.
Yeah. So we've had that in place for a number of months, and moving forward, we have what's called a day X. So we've had a day 0 and we're day whatever it is since day 0. And when we get back to a world where, okay, we are going to be working in the office, it's called day X, and that hasn't been set. But when day X happens, HKS has already said we will have a flexible work experience is what we're calling it, which basically has made it to where any employee can work from home 2 to 3 days a week, and then 2 to 3 days in the office. That's their choice. And they did, our research group did surveys every single week as we were in COVID 2020. So those 2 to 3 days is based off of our feedback. It's not just the leadership saying, well, we need to see your faces 2 or 3 days a week. Yeah, so real quick, that's where we're headed with that. And I think a majority of us that responded to that survey, like we did that because we miss human interaction. Yes, I think I could work remotely for the rest of my life if I needed to. But I am feeling it so much right now that I need to be around other people. I don't think I'm an extrovert by any means. Probably not a full introvert either, but right now it's just sitting next to other people would make me feel comfortable. I don't even have to talk to them. But so I think that's where we're headed. And it'll be interesting to see what the rest of the world does moving forward. And I'm worried about the negative impact in terms of architecture business that means.
Me too.
Because now if you don't need a bunch of commercial offices,
Mm-hmm.
you don't need architects to design more.
Right. But you know what? As the commercial space shrinks, other spaces will get larger.
Yeah, I mean the housing.
Housing will get bigger. Restaurants, shopping, those kinds of things will get bigger.
Coffee
So
shops get bigger.
coffee shops, all those great things. So yeah, we're gonna lose. Maybe we'll lose a little bit in one industry, but I think we'll gain it in the others.
Definitely.
But that's still yet to be determined. But that's why firms diversify.
Yeah, that's definitely why they diversify.
Okay. Well, Vickie, thank you so much for being on BIM Thoughts today.
Sure. And you guys know where to find me on LinkedIn.
Right. You're on the LinkedIn. You're on the probably the Twitters and all that other stuff, I would think.
I'm not so active on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mention this anywhere, but I started last year my own blog, Ambitious Transformation, but I'm not very good at that yet. But that information is on my LinkedIn for anybody who's interested.
I wasn't very good at a blog either. That's why I started a podcast. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you have a great day and a happy tomorrow.
You do the same. Thank you.